July 1996. Still working as a picture framer at Illyria Arts. Still don't remember anything specific about what was going on in my life at the time. So we'll jump right into the books for July 1996. I think there's a good mix here. I still own one of these, so you'll get to see at least one cover. But let's start off with Ill Met in Lankmar by Fritz Lieber. Not sure how you say his name. This is actually two books put together. It was from White Wolf Publishing. They were going to put out all of the Fafard and Grey Mouser books. So these are the two main characters. Fafard was a 7 foot tall barbarian. The Grey Mouser is a novice wizard and a thief. And these two books are short story collections, but those sort of connected short stories. So they give you a greater overarching kind of story. The two books that are in here are Swords and Deviltry and Swords Against Death. And so we see how Fafard and the Grey Mouse are met. I think first we get some of their background stuff before they met. Then we see how they met and decide to team up, and certain events that end up motivating them. And this is just sword and sorcery kind of stuff, along the lines of Conan and that sort of thing. A little more lighthearted. Not that they're comedies, but more lighthearted than Conan. And they were pretty good if you like that kind of stuff. So that's our first book, Ill Met in Lankmar. All right, the next two books are nonfiction. The first one is The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, translated by Thomas Cleary. This is a classic, one of those that, like The Art of War, that at a certain time in the 80s, I think, businessmen were reading this because it's a strategy guide, essentially. It's supposed to be a strategy guide for martial arts, for samurai, I suppose, for a warrior. But of course, back in the good old 80s, businessmen thought of themselves this way. And so we're reading these Japanese texts to use them in their business strategies. I'm interested in Eastern philosophy and Japanese history, the feudal period of Japan, which is why I read it. I've never been a businessman, so can't use that excuse. But it's a very interesting book. And I followed that up with Family Traditions on the Art of War by Yagyu Muninori, translated by Thomas Cleary. And I could find no information about this book. I think it's the same kind of thing as the Book of Five Rings, but every time I tried to look it up, Google it, anything else, I would end up at the Book of Five Rings. But I believe it's, again, the same type of book where, it's how family translates to strategy, I suppose, and business people got into it. Anyway, interesting stuff to me. Then we have a book I'm guessing most of you have heard of. Maybe. I don't know. It's 1984 by George Orwell. It's a classic. I enjoyed it. I like Animal Farm better. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about 1984. Everybody should know this book. So I'm going to stop there. Then we have the one book that I still own, The Ultimate Supervillains, edited by Stan Lee. Love that cover. Always love me some villains. This is an anthology. A bunch of different authors. And let's see. Is it full of illustrations? Yes, it is. But so a bunch of different stories featuring different villains. You've got, I'm going to go through this whole thing: Kang the Conqueror, Magneto, Loki, the Ringmaster, Doctor Doom, Mephisto, Super Skrull, Venom and the Absorbing Man together, Ultron, Nightmare, Despair, Carnage, the Wizard and the Sandman together, Typhoid, aka Typhoid Mary, and the Trapster. And then there's a mystery one. I don't know what that is. There's just a question mark. Uh, love this stuff. So happy to still own this book. I will reread it eventually because I just like reading about comic book villains. Let's see. Then we have, excuse me, Now You See It by Richard Matheson. And I wanted to make sure I get these names correctly. So there's this guy, the Great Delacourt. He was a great stage magician, illusionist, and he had a stroke. He's paralyzed, and he can only move his eyes. And so he is our narrator. He is in a chair telling us everything everything is through his eyes. And he's got this crazy mansion with hidden panels and secret rooms and tunnels in the walls and things. He's got a son, Max, who's trying to take over the stage magician business. But Max's wife, she has a twin brother that looks exactly like her. But Max's wife is poisoning Max, and some people are coming over to the place, and it's this really twisty, turny, crazy, just crazy story. People's motivations are a mystery, and because of the nature of this mansion and the fact that we're dealing with magicians and illusionists, never know what's going to happen, never know what's real, what isn't, how things are happening. Really good Richard Matheson stuff. Then we have City of Whispering Stone by George C. Chesbrough. And this is the second book in the Mongo the Magnificent series. It's a private detective series. And so the main character is actually, his name is Dr. Robert Fredrickson, also known as Mongo the Magnificent, excuse me. He is a genius and an ex-circus performer who is also a dwarf. Now he is a private detective, and he is called by his the ringmaster or whatever from the circus that he used to work at, and he's hired to find this missing Iranian strongman, and it just becomes this crazy action adventure mystery globe-trotting story. And I can tell you, the reason I picked up the first Mongo the Magnificent book that I read was because the cover had the same image as, I should have looked up the person's name first, but there was a song back in the 80s, a song that I still love called Salt in My Tears, and the singer's name has flown out of my head. But the album cover for Salt in My Tears was the exact same picture as the cover for one of the Mongo mysteries. And so when I saw that, I had to pick it up and read it, whatever it was. But it's a very bizarre, weird, but fun private eye story. It's crazy. It's definitely not like a Robert B. Parker or a Robert Crace or even Walter Mosley or any of those other. It's very, very unique, I think. That was my impression of it anyway. I think there's 14 books in this. There's a bunch of books in the series. Next up, another nonfiction. Something I would not read today. The Dilbert Principle by Scott Adams. This is a book of comedic essays and includes Dilbert comic strips all about, the workplace. Excuse me. And I think it was funny. It's funny stuff. It's just that Scott Adams is very problematic. I wonder if he was. I always have to wonder. It's been decades since Scott Adams first became huge with the Dilbert comic strip, and he had these best-selling books. Has he always been a problematic person and we just didn't know it? Has he become more vocal about it, or has he changed in those decades to become this crazy person? I don't know, but the book was funny. All right, now we have Bureau 13 by Nick Pallotta. And this is basically Bureau 13 is a secret government organization that fights monsters. Now, this is based on, I believe, a role playing game came first. Then, I don't know the order now. I think the role playing game was the very first thing. And then there's a video game and a series of books. So I know the role playing game was first. I don't know if the video game came before the books or the books before the video game. Doesn't matter. But there's half a dozen books in this series of, excuse me, as I say, it's just your basic secret government organization fighting monsters. Then we have a book that I absolutely love. I really wish I had a copy of this. I'm going to have to find one. I may have to spend extra money to get it. 7 Steps to Midnight by Richard Matheson. And this is a thriller. And it's one of those, an ordinary, completely ordinary guy finds himself in extraordinary circumstances. People are trying to kill him. His sister doesn't know who he is. And it all comes down, I think he finds a ring at the beginning. And people are after this ring. Something like that. It's been a long time since I read it. But again, it's full of twists and turns. And then the ending of this book, I absolutely loved the ending of this book. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it did remind me of a certain movie that, you know what? This video is only 12 and a half minutes long. We're going to take a quick second. I'm going to look something up. I'm going to keep talking so you don't have to sit there in silence. But a real quick search, and I want to check something. There it is. Oh, this is 96. So, this book has something in common with a movie that I really, really like. I read the book in 96, so it came out at least at the latest in 96. Could be a little older than that. I don't recall. But the movie I'm thinking of came out in 97, so the book did it first. Anyway, 7 Steps to Midnight, Richard Matheson. I absolutely love this book. And then finally, the last book that I read in July of 1996 was Spider-Man Deadly Cure by Bill McKay. And this is I believe it's a young adult book. It's thin, it's a quick read, and basically there's someone working on the super soldier serum, I think, and Spider-Man and Daredevil team up to stop Kingpin and Hobgoblin from getting their hands on these experiments. Very quick read. And that's it. That's all I have to say about that one. And that is everything that I read. Let's just flip the page. Yes, that is everything that I read in July of 1996. So, do I have a question? And I thought about taking the time to come up with a question beforehand, and then I didn't do it because I spent all my time looking up a bunch of these books to remind myself of what they were. So, you know what? My question, do you have a favorite period of history? Period and place. As I said, I don't know why. Fascinated with at least the fictional feudal Japan. I've read some nonfiction, but I really like a lot of fiction. Things like Lone Wolf and Cub, There's an author. Eventually we'll get to these books by Dale Furutana, who that take place in that era. They're actually like samurai mysteries. Actually, there's a recent author, Susan Spann, has a whole series of mysteries that take place in that era. Excuse me. So I really like it as a fictional setting. Some people have a problem with that sort of thing. I recently saw someone on Twitter saying that, my heritage is not your fantasy setting. But I'm aside from all the fiction, I have an interest in the actual history of that time. Um, and then of course, like the time period that King Arthur may or may not have existed in England is interesting. Um, the Old West, of course, again, so much of that is romanticized. Reading the truths about the Old West, not romantic, but interesting. So, do you have any interest in history at all? I guess first of all, and then if you do, what in history is your interest? For lack of a better way to phrase that question, let me know in the comments below. Comments are open for spoiler. Oh wait, see, I'm jumping the gun. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is EricSmith5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH5757. Yeah, that's all I've got for you this week. So until next week, read more books.